I have told you this so that my joy may be in you, and that your joy might be complete. My absolute favorite part of being a kindergarten student was show and tell. I really liked show and tell. I really, really did. I was amazed at what I and my fellow students were able to bring to school in a brown paper bag. And I was amazed in the telling of what was inside the bag, how the imagination of the storyteller ran wild. There's something about show and tell. There's something about you and I that we need the visual. We need somebody to show us along with telling us. I have told you this so that my joy might be in you and that your joy might be complete. So now that Jesus has told us, what does complete joy look like? Perhaps a little show and tell might help us today, huh? I feel like I'm in kindergarten again. Once upon a time, there was a philosophy professor who stood in front of his students one day in the classroom, and he put in front of them a vessel filled with golf balls. And he asked his students, "Is this jar full?" And they responded, "Yes." But then he looked at his fellow students and he grabbed another vessel. And this one had beads in it. And he took the vessel and he poured the beads into the already filled vessel of golf balls, which I'm not going to do right now because I don't want the mess. And I have to do this 2 more times this weekend. So use your imagination. And he poured the beads in with the golf balls. And of course, they fell in between the cracks until they were level to the top. And then the philosophy teacher asked his students, "Is the vessel full?" And they all answered, "Yes." And then the philosophy professor grabbed one more vessel. And this one was filled with sand. And he took the vessel of sand and he poured it in with the golf balls and the beads. And of course, the sand, it drifted in between and it filled in all the crooks and crevices. And once he got it level to the top, he looked at his fellow students and he asked them the question, "Is the container full?" And they all answered, "Yes." And then he took a vessel of water. And he poured it on top of the sand, on top of the beads, on top of the golf balls. And he looked at his fellow students, and he smiled at them and he said, "This container represents your life. This container, with the golf balls and the beads and the sand and the water all combined and mixed together, is your life." The golf balls represent the really important aspects of our life. You know what I'm talking about. It's the things of love. It's family, it's spouse, it's friends, it's relationships, it's our health. Those are the important aspects of our life. They represent the golf balls. And then there are the beads. The beads, they represent, of course, the other stuff that is part of our life that is also important, but shouldn't be as important, like our job, and our home, and our car, and those other kinds of things that we depend upon. One could probably add to that our cell phone or our tablet. Those would be the beads. And then the sand, he went on to say, why the sand is the small stuff that is a part of our life that requires us, our time and attention, but oftentimes, he went on to say, it's the sand that we put in the vessel first. We spend so much time on the small stuff. You know, the time spent on Facebook and updating our Snapchat and all of those kinds of things, and as important as they are, we know in relationship to the important things, they're not as important. But if we start with the sand, guess what? There's no room for the really important stuff. You can't add the golf balls. You can't add the beads after you already have the sand in there. So the philosophy professor looked at his students and he said, if you want complete joy, if you want to know what complete joy and fullness of life looks like, it's about spending every day being attentive to the golf ball aspects of life, our spouses, our relationships, our family, our friends, our health. Start there first. And then deal with those other things, as important as they are. Please keep in mind, as the philosophy professor went on to say, all of these things are needed. It's not a matter of either or, it's a matter of both and. In this case, all three and four ands. But it's putting them in their proper order. It's about prioritizing what's important in life. And so Jesus in the gospel today, why he tells us that the most important thing in life is, well, it's as simple and as complex and as difficult as this. Love one another. It is about the golf ball things. It is about relationships. It is about tending to them each and every day, mindful of the fact that without love, we are nothing. And then one of the students raised her hand in class and looked at the philosophy professor and said, could you tell us what the water symbolizes? Believe it or not, in that philosophy class, it was actually 2 cans of beer. But for the sake of the environment that I'm in, you know what I'm talking about. And the philosophy professor looked at the students and he said, I'm glad you asked about the liquid, because he said, no matter how full our lives become, no matter how convinced we are that there's not another second of the day and our days are full and we are absolutely overwhelmed, he said, always remember that there's still time to sit down with a good friend and to have a favorite beverage. Because there's always, or should always, be room for that. So Jesus looked at his disciples, and he looks at you and I, and he simply says, I have told you this so that my joy might be in you, and that your joy might be complete.